Life is a journey filled with moments of joy, connection, and love, but also marked by moments of pain, betrayal, and heartbreak. Every one of us, at some point in our lives, has been hurt by someone, through words, actions, or neglect. The natural instinct is to retaliate, to hold on to resentment, or to let bitterness seep into our hearts. Yet, there is a higher way, a way that reveals not only our strength, but also how God Himself intervenes in the lives of those who harm us. God does not overlook injustice. He sees every tear, every sleepless night, every betrayal, and every wound inflicted upon your soul. But His response is far greater than human revenge. His justice, His healing, and His protection are woven into how He deals with those who hurt you. This is not just about punishment. It is about restoration, growth, and the shaping of your character into something stronger, braver, and more resilient. Today, I want to share with you 5 key truths about how God deals with those who hurt you, and why these truths can set you free from the weight of anger and unforgiveness. When you have been wronged, one of the deepest wounds does not always come from the act itself, but from the thought that no one truly sees the pain you are carrying. Perhaps you have been betrayed by a close friend, or someone has spoken lies about you to damage your reputation, or maybe you have faced cruelty in silence while the world looked away. In those moments, the loneliness of your suffering can feel unbearable, and the injustice seems magnified when the person who hurt you appears to escape unscathed. They smile in public, they continue with their lives, and you wonder if there will ever be a reckoning for the pain they caused. It is in these moments that you must remember the truth. God sees what others try to hide. He is not blind to what was done to you, nor is He ignorant of the motives that fueled those actions. Every tear you shed in secret is recorded, every word whispered against you is heard, and every act of harm cloaked in darkness is laid bare before His eyes. God's vision is not like human sight. We see appearances. We see what people choose to reveal, but God pierces through the surface into the depths of the heart. He sees not only what was done, but why it was done. Sometimes those who hurt us present themselves to the world as kind, charming, or successful, and it seems unfair that they can live a double life while you are left to carry invisible scars. Yet, you must remember that nothing stays hidden forever. In the Book of Wisdom, we are told that there is nothing concealed that will not one day be revealed. People may escape human accountability for a season, but they cannot escape divine accountability. God sees the hidden cruelty, the selfish ambition, the malice behind the smile, and the lies behind the carefully crafted image. Even when others are deceived, God is not. This truth is both comforting and sobering. Comforting, because it means your pain has not gone unnoticed, and sobering, because it reminds us that no one, including ourselves, can live outside the gaze of God. When others dismiss your story or minimize your hurt, God validates it by His perfect knowledge. He knows exactly what was done and how it made you feel. He knows the nights you replayed the betrayal over and over in your mind, the heaviness that sat in your chest when you had to smile through the ache, the way your faith wavered because you could not understand why it happened. He knows how you were treated unfairly, even when no one else bothered to listen. The fact that He sees means that you are not alone in your suffering. You are not invisible, even when others fail to notice. It is important to understand that when God sees, He does not merely observe passively. His seeing carries with it the weight of His justice and His care. Consider for a moment the story of Hagar, the servant who was mistreated and cast aside. In her despair, she fled into the wilderness, broken and forgotten. Yet it was there that God revealed Himself as the God who sees. He saw her pain, her tears, her rejection, and in that moment she realized she was never invisible. The same God who saw Hagar sees you in the wilderness of your suffering. He does not abandon you in the shadows of your hurt, but comes close to remind you that your pain is real and that you are held in his attention. When people hurt you, one of the lies the enemy wants you to believe is that it does not matter because no one noticed. This lie is meant to keep you in despair, but the truth dismantles it. God saw it all. He saw the moment they decided to harm you. He saw the words they chose. He saw the betrayal they carried out, and he saw the way they tried to justify themselves afterward. Even when they tried to bury their actions under layers of excuses, he saw right through it. Their concealment cannot erase the reality of what happened, and it cannot shield them from divine awareness. There is a profound sense of relief in knowing that you do not have to carry the burden of exposing every wrong yourself. You do not need to spend your life proving to others how deeply you were wounded or how unjustly you were treated. God has already seen it all, and his testimony is enough. This awareness allows you to step into freedom. Because God sees, you can release the need to make everyone else see. You can stop exhausting yourself trying to explain your story to people who are determined not to understand. You can stop chasing validation from those who will never grant it. God's vision is all the validation you need. The God of the universe acknowledges your pain, and in his acknowledgement, there is healing. When you feel unseen, you can rest in the reality that you are fully seen by the one who matters most. And what about those who inflicted the pain? What happens to them when God sees? Here is where you must remember that God is not mocked. What is sown in secret will one day be reaped in the open. This does not mean you should sit by and wait for calamity to strike those who hurt you. Nor does it mean that every consequence will be immediate. But it does mean that no action done in darkness can escape the light of God's truth. Those who harm others and hide behind appearances may enjoy temporary success, but it is only for a season. Eventually, the mask will fall, the truth will surface, and accountability will come. That is not your job, it is God's. There is also another layer here. Sometimes those who hurt you are themselves carrying brokenness they have never dealt with. While this does not excuse their actions, it reminds you that God sees their brokenness too. He sees the wounds that drive their cruelty, the fears that fuel their pride, and the emptiness that pushes them to harm others. This does not minimize your pain, but it magnifies God's capacity to work justice and healing simultaneously. He can deal with the harm done to you and also confront the brokenness in them. That is why his justice is perfect. It is never one-sided, never shallow, never rushed. It addresses the full reality of the situation, both seen and unseen. So when you are tempted to despair, remember this: you are never invisible to God. He saw the moment you were wounded. He saw the aftermath when you carried that hurt in silence. He saw the prayers you whispered in the night when no one else was there to comfort you. He saw the strength it took for you to get up and keep moving when you felt like crumbling. He saw the faith it took for you to trust him even when you could not see the outcome. And he sees the people who hurt you too. Not with blind rage, but with perfect justice. This is why you can rest. You do not need to live in bitterness. You do not need to plot revenge. And you do not need to remain captive to the thought that no one understands. God has already seen it all, and he will act according to his perfect will. Your job is to trust that his eyes have not missed a single detail, and his heart has not ignored a single tear. Because when God sees what others try to hide, it is the beginning of your healing and the assurance of his justice. When you are hurt by others, it can feel as if you have been left defenseless, exposed to wounds that no one seems willing to shield you from. The betrayal might come from someone you trusted deeply. The criticism may strike you when you are already vulnerable, or the rejection might hit you when you most needed to feel loved. In those moments, you may ask yourself where God was when it all happened. Why didn't he stop it? Why did he allow the words to be spoken, the knife to be twisted, or the trust to be broken? These are questions every hurting heart wrestles with, but to understand how God protects and defends you, you must look deeper than the surface of visible events. His protection is not always about preventing the blow. Often it is about sustaining you through it, shielding you from unseen destruction, and defending your spirit in ways that human eyes cannot perceive. Think about the countless moments of danger you never even knew about. You don't see the conversations that could have turned into traps but never reached your ears. You don't witness the plots that fall apart before they reach your doorstep. You don't realize how many times you were spared from deeper wounds because God stood between you and an enemy who wanted to destroy more than just your reputation or your peace of mind. If you only knew how many battles were fought on your behalf in the invisible realm, you would understand why you are still standing even after all that was meant to break you. His defense is not always loud, and his protection is not always obvious, but it is constant and it is powerful. When people hurt you, they may think they have succeeded in diminishing you, but God's defense often comes in the form of preserving your purpose. No one can touch what he has already set in motion for your life. Words may sting, betrayal may wound, rejection may bruise, but none of these things can cancel the calling he has placed within you. His defense is not limited to silencing those who speak against you. It is about ensuring that their attempts to derail you cannot succeed. Even when you stumble, his hand upholds you. Even when you doubt, his strength covers you. The fact that you are still able to move forward, despite the pain, is evidence that his shield has been around you all along. Many people confuse God's defense with immediate vindication. We often want him to prove everyone wrong right away, to silence the lies, to expose the truth, and to show the world that we were not deserving of the pain we endured. But God's defense is not built on human timing or human ego. It is built on eternal wisdom. He knows that sometimes the best defense is to allow the world to think what it wants while he quietly works in you, strengthening your spirit and protecting your heart until the truth reveals itself in undeniable ways. His defense is not about winning an argument. It is about winning your soul back from bitterness and despair. There is something profound in knowing that you don't have to fight every battle yourself. You don't have to respond to every insult, clap back at every accusation, or prove yourself to every critic. When you truly trust that God is your defender, you can rest in silence while he speaks on your behalf through time, circumstances, and outcomes. Your life itself will become the evidence of his defense, because despite the hurt, you will rise stronger, wiser, and more radiant than before. That rise is not something your enemies can control, and it is not something you orchestrate. It is the defense of God unfolding in plain sight. Protection also takes the form of boundaries he establishes even when you don't realize it. Sometimes God allows certain people to exit your life abruptly, and though it feels like abandonment or betrayal, it is actually his way of protecting you from deeper harm that could have unfolded if they remained. Other times, he allows relationships to fail or opportunities to close, not because he wishes you pain, but because he sees the destruction that could follow if you forced your way forward. What feels like rejection is often divine protection in disguise. You may look back years later and realize that what once felt like your worst heartbreak was actually the very thing that spared you from a far greater disaster. One of the most overlooked ways God defends you is through his peace. When everything around you is in chaos, and people have spoken against you, and the pain is raw, there is a supernatural calm that comes when you choose to trust him. That peace is his shield. It guards your heart from being consumed by anger, and it guards your mind from being overtaken by anxiety. Peace is not passive. It is one of the most powerful defenses God gives you because it silences the noise of the enemy. People may try to provoke you, to drag you into battles that will drain your soul. But when God's peace covers you, you can walk away without fear, knowing that your worth does not hinge on anyone's approval or apology. Another powerful element of his defense is the way he elevates you despite the harm others intended. Consider how many times people tried to push you down, yet somehow you still advanced. Consider the times your name was spoken against, but instead of losing ground, you gained resilience, wisdom, and favor. That is not coincidence. That is God defending you. He takes what was meant for evil and redirects it for good. He allows your wounds to become testimonies, your scars to become lessons, and your trials to become triumphs. What greater defense is there than turning your pain into a platform for growth? We often forget that the greatest defense is not about others being proven wrong, but about us being preserved in truth. God's defense ensures that you are not destroyed by the harm done to you. It ensures that your soul remains intact, your hope remains alive, and your heart remains soft enough to love again. Without his defense, bitterness would consume you, anger would define you, and despair would paralyze you. But because he defends your soul, you can rise above the actions of others. You can forgive without being naive. You can let go without being reckless, and you can move forward without being chained to the past. So when you feel exposed, remember that you are not unprotected. When you feel defenseless, remember that God is already standing in front of you, behind you, and within you. His defense is not always about removing the pain instantly, but about ensuring that the pain does not define your future. His protection is not always about preventing people from hurting you, but about making sure their actions cannot rob you of your destiny. He shields you in ways you may never fully recognize on this side of eternity, but one day you will see clearly how many times he fought battles you never even knew existed. And that is why you can rest. You don't have to live in fear of what people may say or do. You don't have to live constantly on guard, waiting for the next wound. You can trust that the one who created you is also the one who defends you. His protection is greater than human schemes, and his defense is stronger than human accusations. So lift your head, even in the midst of pain, because the God who shields you has never lost a battle, and he is not about to start now. One of the most extraordinary truths you can hold on to when you've been hurt is that what was meant to harm, you can become the very thing that shapes you into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. At first glance, it doesn't make sense. Pain feels destructive, betrayal feels devastating, and rejection feels final. In the rawness of those wounds, the last thing you want to believe is that any good could possibly come from it. Yet over and over, life proves that God has the power to take what others intended to crush you with and transform it into the soil where your growth takes root. What others meant for evil, he can turn into good, and while that process is not easy, it is profoundly beautiful. When people hurt you, they usually aren't thinking about your development. They may be acting out of jealousy, selfishness, or cruelty. Their intention is often to diminish you, to silence you, or to break your spirit. But what they fail to realize is that God is sovereign over your story, and nothing slips past his hands. Even when he allows you to experience pain, he never allows it without a purpose. The harm done to you does not define the end of your story. Instead, it becomes the very material God uses to build a new chapter. That's the mystery of his work. He doesn't cause the hurt, but he refuses to let it be wasted. Think of how many times you've come out of painful situations with lessons you never would have learned otherwise. Betrayal teaches you discernment. Rejection teaches you self-worth. Criticism teaches you resilience. Loss teaches you gratitude. These are qualities that cannot be developed in comfort. They are forged in the fire of hardship. While it would be easier if life could shape us through joy alone, The reality is that some of the deepest growth only happens when we walk through pain. And the beauty of God's love is that He ensures those experiences are not random. They become refining seasons where He chisels away what does not belong in you and strengthens what needs to grow. In many ways, the harm done to you becomes a classroom. You learn about human nature in ways that make you wiser. You learn about your own heart in ways that make you braver. You learn about God's faithfulness in ways that make you more anchored. Each lesson equips you for the future. The person who walked into that season of hurt is not the same person who comes out of it. You emerge with a deeper understanding of yourself, of others, and of God. That is why people sometimes look back on their hardest seasons and realize they wouldn't erase them even if they could. Because those very seasons produced the growth that shaped them into who they are today. There is also a strength that develops only when you have been wounded. You discover resilience you never knew you had. You realize that while pain may bend you, it does not have the power to break you when God is holding you up. Each time you rise after being knocked down, you build spiritual muscle, and with every rise, you become less fragile, less fearful, and more grounded in who you are. This strength is not cold or hardened. It is strength that carries compassion because it was born through pain. You begin to understand the struggles of others on a deeper level because you yourself have walked through fire. That empathy becomes one of your greatest tools. Growth also comes in the form of clarity. Sometimes the harm others cause forces you to step back and re-evaluate your boundaries, your priorities, and your relationships. You begin to see who truly values you and who only stayed because of convenience. You recognize toxic patterns you may have ignored before. You gain the courage to walk away from people and situations that do not align with your worth. What felt like harm at first becomes the doorway to healthier choices. It is through pain that many people finally discover the courage to say no to what diminishes them and yes to what nurtures them. Without the hurt, they might never have gained the clarity to change course. Another profound way God turns harm into growth is by deepening your dependence on Him. Pain has a way of stripping away illusions of control. When others wound you, you realize how little you can rely on human approval or stability. And in that raw vulnerability, you find yourself leaning on God in ways you never did before. You cling to His promises, you pour out your heart in prayer, and you experience His presence more intimately. That deeper connection becomes the anchor of your life. It is through pain that many people discover the strength of their faith and the reality of God's comfort. Without the harm, they might never have tasted the sweetness of His nearness in the storm. And then there is the mysterious way God uses harm to position you for purpose. Sometimes the very rejection you experience is what redirects you to the path you were meant to take. The closed door that felt like a punishment is actually the divine redirection that saves you from wasting years in the wrong place. The betrayal that broke your heart might be what frees you to pursue something greater. The criticism that cut you down might be what drives you to refine your gifts and emerge stronger. In hindsight, you begin to see that what felt like the end was actually the beginning of something new. God has a way of using the wounds inflicted by others as stepping stones to greater purpose. It is not easy to embrace growth when you are in the middle of hurt. At that point, all you feel is the sting of injustice. But the promise remains, God will not allow your pain to be wasted. He weaves even the ugliest moments into the tapestry of your destiny. One day, what you thought was your breaking point will reveal itself as your turning point. What you thought was a detour will show itself as the direct path to where you were meant to be. The harm that was intended to bury you will instead plant you, and from that soil, something stronger will rise. So the next time you feel overwhelmed by the weight of what someone has done to you, Remind yourself of this truth. Their harm does not have the final word, God does. And His word is growth. Their cruelty may have knocked you down, but He is using it to build you up. Their betrayal may have scarred you, but He is using it to strengthen your discernment. Their rejection may have broken your heart, but He is using it to reveal your true worth. This transformation does not erase the reality of the hurt, but it redeems it. In the end, those who harmed you will see something they never expected. The very pain they tried to use against you has become the platform for your resilience. They meant to silence you, but you found your voice. They meant to destroy you, but you discovered your strength. They meant to weaken you, but you grew into someone they could never imagine. And all of this happened not because of them, but because of God. That is the beauty of His power. He takes harm and transforms it into growth, so profound that you will one day look back and say, I am stronger not in spite of what happened, but because of it. One of the hardest things to accept when you've been hurt is that the people who wronged you often seem to walk away unscathed. They may continue living as if nothing ever happened, smiling in public, succeeding in their endeavors, and even gaining admiration from others. Meanwhile, you are left to carry the weight of the wound, struggling to heal from the damage. It feels unjust. You wonder where the fairness is, and you may even cry out to God, asking why He doesn't intervene immediately. But the truth is that God always holds people accountable, only not always in the way or the timing we expect. His justice is never absent. It is simply operating on a higher plane, one where time is measured differently and consequences unfold in ways that reveal His wisdom, rather than our impatience. Human beings are wired to want instant justice. When someone hurts us, we want them to feel what we felt. We want them to lose what we lost. We want others to know the truth of what was done and for the wrongdoer to be exposed right away. Yet, if justice were always instant, there would be no room for grace, no opportunity for repentance, and no unfolding of the deeper lessons God wants to teach both the offender and the offended. God does not ignore wrongdoing, but He also does not rush His justice. Instead, He lets it come in its perfect time, ensuring that when it does, it is undeniable, transformative, and complete. The idea of timing is crucial. Sometimes God's accountability shows up sooner than we think. A person who harms others may find their relationships deteriorating, their peace slipping away, or their heart becoming restless. From the outside, their life may look intact, but inside they are unraveling under the weight of their choices. Other times, it may take years before their actions catch up with them, but when it does, it often comes in a way that reveals the full measure of what they have sown. God is patient, but His patience should never be mistaken for forgetfulness. He does not overlook what was done to you. He simply knows the right moment when justice will have its deepest impact. There is also an important distinction between human revenge and divine accountability. Human revenge seeks to hurt back in equal measure, but divine accountability seeks truth, correction, and restoration of balance. When God deals with those who harm you, His goal is not just punishment, it is revelation. He brings their actions to light so that they cannot continue in deception. He confronts them with the reality of their choices so they cannot pretend ignorance. He ensures that the harm they caused does not remain hidden or without consequence. In some cases, that accountability looks like exposure, where the truth of their actions is revealed in front of others. In other cases, it looks like the slow unraveling of what they tried to build on a foundation of lies. Either way, it comes in His timing, not ours. This can be difficult to accept because in the meantime, you may feel as though they are getting away with it. But remember that accountability is not only about what happens externally. It is also about what happens internally. A person who has done wrong carries an unseen weight that eventually becomes unbearable. Guilt, shame, emptiness. or the constant need to cover their tracks becomes a prison they cannot escape. Even when they appear happy, their spirit is restless because you cannot plant seeds of harm and harvest peace. God's justice is woven into the fabric of life itself. Whatever a person sows, they will eventually reap. That is not just a promise. It is a law of the spiritual universe. Another dimension of divine timing is that it often allows space for the offender to change. As much as we may not want to admit it, God cares about their soul too. Just as He sees your pain, He sees their brokenness. Sometimes He withholds immediate accountability to give them the chance to repent and turn away from their harmful behavior. This doesn't diminish the reality of your hurt, but it shows the depth of His mercy. If they choose to ignore that opportunity, then the weight of accountability only grows heavier, and when it comes, it is often more severe because of the time they had to change and refused to. For you, the challenge is to trust this process. Trust that God has not overlooked your suffering. Trust that He has marked the day when justice will arrive. Trust that His timing, though it may not match your desire for immediacy, will always be perfect. And trust that His way of dealing with those who hurt you will be far more thorough than anything you could orchestrate on your own. When you try to take accountability into your own hands, you often end up entangling yourself in bitterness, anger, and further pain. But when you release it to God, you free yourself to heal while He takes on the responsibility of justice. It is also important to recognize that sometimes the accountability of God is subtle. It may not come as a dramatic downfall, but as a slow erosion of the very things the person valued most. The peace they once had is gone. The relationships they relied on begin to fracture. The success they chased begins to feel empty. These are signs that God's justice is at work, even when it is not obvious to the outside world. And then there are times when His accountability is unmistakable. The truth is exposed, the mask falls, and the harm they caused is revealed for all to see. In either case, the outcome is the same. No one escapes the justice of God. You may never get an apology. You may never see them admit what they did. You may never witness their downfall with your own eyes. But that does not mean justice has not been served. God works in dimensions far beyond what we can see, and His accountability often reaches places we cannot imagine. He is not just concerned with what you see on the surface. He is concerned with the eternal realities that shape both your soul and theirs. His justice ensures that truth prevails, even if it takes longer than you want it to. The comfort in all of this is that you are not forgotten. Your pain has not been ignored, and the harm you endured is not without consequence. God has already recorded every detail, and He has already appointed the time when accountability will unfold. That time may not align with your desire for quick resolution, but when it comes, it will be perfect. His justice is never too late, and it is never incomplete. It addresses the wrong fully. It brings clarity to what was hidden, and it restores balance in a way that only He can orchestrate. So let go of the weight of trying to make things right yourself. Release the desire to see immediate payback. Trust that the God who sees all, and the God who knows all, and the God who governs all is already at work. His timing is not slow, it is deliberate. His justice is not weak, it is perfect. And His accountability is not absent, it is certain. Those who hurt you may think they have escaped, but they are only walking into the timing of God, where every action will meet its consequence, and every injustice will meet its reckoning. When someone wounds you deeply, bitterness feels almost natural. It grows quietly in the soil of your heart, watered by every memory of betrayal, every replay of harsh words, and every thought of how unfairly you were treated. At first, bitterness feels like self-protection, as if holding on to anger will shield you from being hurt again. But what seems like protection is actually poison. The more you clutch bitterness, the more it seeps into your thoughts, your words, your choices, and even your spirit. It doesn't stay contained. It spreads into every corner of your life, stealing your joy and dulling your capacity to love. This is why God calls you to release bitterness. Not because what happened was small, not because your pain doesn't matter, but because He knows holding on to bitterness will chain you to the very people and events you want freedom from. Releasing bitterness is not the same as pretending the hurt never happened. It's not about denying your pain or minimizing the injustice. It's about deciding that you will not allow that pain to become your permanent identity. Bitterness whispers that the only way to protect yourself is to keep rehearsing the harm. But God invites you to a higher way, to hand that pain over to Him, to trust that He has seen it, that He will deal with it, and that He can heal what others broke. Forgiveness is not excusing the wrong. It's placing the responsibility for justice into God's hands so that you can be free. Trusting God with your pain requires courage because it means letting go of control. Bitterness thrives on control. It makes you feel that by holding on to resentment, you somehow hold power over the one who hurt you. But the truth is that bitterness doesn't keep them in a prison. It keeps you in one. Many times the person who hurt you has already moved on, while you are the one still carrying the weight. Trusting God means acknowledging that you don't have to carry it anymore. It means saying, God, I cannot fix this, but I trust you can. I cannot heal myself, but I believe you will. I cannot make sense of this, but I know you already have a plan. Releasing bitterness is also about reclaiming your peace. As long as you hold resentment, your peace will always be vulnerable to what someone else did. Your joy will always be tied to whether or not they apologize, whether or not they change, or whether or not they face consequences. But when you release them into God's hands, you detach your peace from their behavior. Your heart no longer rises and falls based on them. You are anchored in God. That anchoring is freedom. It allows you to live fully in the present instead of being trapped in the replay of the past. God's call to trust Him is not a shallow suggestion. It is a pathway to healing. He knows how heavy the burden of bitterness is. He knows how it hardens your heart and clouds your vision. He knows how it makes you cynical, suspicious, and quick to expect the worst. But He also knows who you are when you are free, when you are light-hearted, hopeful, open to love, and unafraid to dream again. That is why He calls you to trust Him. Because He sees not just your pain, but the version of you that pain is trying to bury. Trusting Him is how that buried version of you rises again. Trusting God also requires patience. Letting go of bitterness does not mean you will feel healed overnight. Some days the memories will resurface. Some nights the anger will feel fresh again. Trust does not erase those waves, it gives you the anchor to withstand them. Each time bitterness tries to creep back in, you remind yourself, I've placed this in God's hands. He has not forgotten me. He will handle this. Over time, that constant surrender weakens bitterness until it no longer holds power over you. Trusting God becomes not a one-time act, but a daily choice, a rhythm of release that creates space for healing. It is also important to understand that forgiveness and trust are not the same as reconciliation. God never asks you to put yourself back into harm's way with people who remain toxic. Releasing bitterness doesn't mean pretending everything is fine and returning to unhealthy patterns. It simply means you refuse to let hatred dominate your heart. You can forgive from a distance. You can trust God without trusting those who hurt you again. This distinction matters because many people resist forgiveness thinking it requires reconciliation, when in fact, forgiveness is about freedom, not forced closeness. When you release bitterness, you make room for something greater. You open the door for joy to return, for love to flow again, and for God's peace to guard your mind. You begin to see yourself not as a victim of harm, but as a survivor shaped by grace. The hurt becomes part of your story, but it is no longer the headline. Instead, the headline becomes how you chose trust over resentment, how you chose faith over control, and how you discovered a strength you didn't know you had. This is the kind of transformation that makes others look at you and wonder how you still radiate light after so much darkness. And that radiance becomes a testimony, not to the greatness of your willpower, but to the greatness of God's healing. Sometimes, releasing bitterness feels unfair, as if you are letting someone get away with what they did. But remember this: trusting God does not erase justice. It entrusts it to the one who judges perfectly. Your release does not mean their release from accountability. It only means you are no longer carrying the responsibility for their consequences. You trust that God, who sees the unseen and knows the hidden motives, will deal with them in His perfect way. That is why you can let go, not because you're pretending it didn't matter, but because you know it mattered so much that only God is qualified to handle it. And in trusting Him, you find yourself healed in ways you never expected. You laugh again, you breathe easier, you love deeper. The person who once had power over your heart through the wound they inflicted no longer holds that place. God has reclaimed it. You begin to see your pain as part of a larger story where grace, resilience, and redemption are the final chapters. And you realize that your healing is not just for you. It becomes hope for others who are also trapped in bitterness. Your freedom becomes their inspiration. So if you are holding on to bitterness today, hear this call clearly. God is asking you to release it. Not because your hurt is small, but because your life is too big to be defined by it. He is asking you to trust Him, not because it will be easy, but because it will set you free. Trust Him with the justice. Trust Him with the timing. Trust Him with your heart. And as you do, you will find that the wound that once controlled you becomes the place where His grace shines the brightest.